I want to suggest to you that the current government policy and previous government policies restrict good child development. And the reason I think that is I spend a lot of time running an organisation that seeks to understand and research precisely how children need to develop in order to be efficient learners. I initially started out with my own son 20 years ago, who'd been blinded by our local hospital, and I managed to reopen pathways from eye to brain with my co-directors and get the motor skills working properly and the sound, such that he left school a year early with top A-level results and has gone on to be a perfectly successful professional who is fully independent. The writing framework, which is released this month, very much dominated by the education industry and the higher level thereof, knows that writing is complex, but they don't understand that human infancy runs from 0 to 7, 8, and that in that time, motor skills and senses develop individually and integrate. You're not ready to start doing complex things until 7, 8. They want to teach handwriting and spelling and reception. They want sentence instruction. I'm going to suggest there are better ways of doing it. Spoken language is important, it's vital. Sound comes before reading or writing, full sound processing, and that is definitely not in place at 4. Quality is definitely more important than quantity. Reception year is vital for human development. It is not vital for writing. Identifying pupils who've got additional support. I'm sorry, I'm looking at children in year 4, and what I'm seeing is we're missing the development that should have been happening at 4, 5, 6, and that is why they need additional support. And not surprisingly, it's going to take time to tackle all the challenges because 4 is not the right time to start writing, and so on. And I fear the last one, that leaders must establish culture and curriculum, is in fact an invitation to workplace bullying. The management will be under pressure. If they don't put the pressure on the teachers are going to be seen as failing. Therefore, there'll be pressure from the management to the teachers to the students, the pupils, and the pressure will be on the parents. Everybody bullies and everyone gets very tense, which, to be honest, is what's happening with the current education system. It's not working. We need to stop and think. And I wish this video to be about stopping and thinking. It is a serious health warning for the British economy and education. First thing is human hands develop the muscles, the bones, the skills. You are not ready at 4 to control fine motor skills. You haven't even got all the bones properly formed. They are still busy converting from cartilage. You can go anywhere on Google and you can find videos and x-rays of child hand development. It really is not till, as you can see, at about 8, and then through to the teenage years that we're getting full development. But 4 is way too young, and there are other reasons for that. What you should be developing from 0 through to 7, 8 is postural control. Humans stand on 2 legs. We're not on all 4s anymore. We have to develop on all 4s and then redevelop enough strength to support our core and our spine. And that is a very serious process, and it links to our whole body, it links to our whole sensory system, and it needs to be done, it needs to be supported by the adults around us. And we are not doing that, and we're giving children furniture which does not support good postural development. We have no PE curriculum to support good postural development. But you need good posture, because if you have good posture, you can eventually isolate your fine motor skills and then gain fine motor skill control. But if your posture's all over the place, you are not going to have good fine motor skill control. So posture is something that happens, and it's well documented and researched. It happens 0 through to 7. 7 is very different from 4. The next thing you need to think about in motor skills development is what's called bilateral integration. The human body has a left and a right side. The brain has a left and a right side. Left brain controls right body, right brain controls left body. In the years 4 through to 7, we need to develop what's called bilateral integration of motor skills. Left and right need to learn how to work together and in opposition. The first part of that job is a thing called suppressing primitive reflexes, and those are automatic muscle movements that infants have. So you see it when a newborn's they have a startle reflex. There are a lot of reflexes. They need to be properly integrated through proper exercise, largely on the floor, playgrounds, climbing, crawling, and so on. We have no checks that every child has integrated those, or PE curriculum to make sure there's good integration in that first reception year. If you don't integrate your primitive reflexes, that will impact on your control of your eye muscles. It impacts on your control of postural control. It impacts on your ability to cross your midline with hand, eye, and brain. It is really, really, really important. It needs to be done, and it needs to be in part of a PE curriculum that makes sense. It can be fun, but trust me, it's really important. And then our motor skills from there need to be properly developed to make sure that everyone has got really good symmetrical use of motor skills. Everybody can work with opposing motor skills, that everybody can do one thing with one side and a different thing with the other side. So, like, holding a piece of paper and cutting a shape out. It is very important. It's asymmetrical bilateral integration. And finally, we need to get left and right able to cross over the midline really well. Those are the foundations of understanding left and right, understanding where you are in space. It is very important. It does not come into place until 7 years of age, but there's a distinct set of exercises that children can be doing in order to master it. So we need a physical education curriculum that supports proper motor skills development through the 0 to 7, but also that checks, also that goes on maintaining those motor skills through the junior school years, through the secondary school years. And in the secondary school years, teaching children precisely how they need to maintain their motor skills for life so they do not get backache, they do not have other aches and pains, and they know how to reset their system basically, and when to go and see a professional to get extra support. But for most people, they could certainly manage their body much better for life. We don't teach it, and that is the most sensible bit of preventative healthcare that we could be giving anyone. The next thing is sound processing. So we're getting children at 4 to write, and they know that it's incredible cognitive load. They know that it's causing problems with its very complex task. Primary reason it is a complex task is because it is not until 7 or 8 years of age that your child has gained full posture and has established the sound processing skills to both make sense of all the sounds in the English language and pronounce them. If you cannot sound process, that will impact on your eye movements. So we're not in a rush, and look at where we're at 4. There's a huge number of sounds the child cannot properly process. None of the phonics programs are properly calibrated to recognize the sequence in which children learn sounds and to understand how a child processes sound and how they develop the ability to process sound. So even if all you're doing is playing around with phonological sounds, it is really important to understand that. It's really important to understand rhythm and to build such skills into a child. So what we really ought to be doing is a lot of reciting rhymes, doing action games with hand clapping, doing things like reciting books we know and acting them out, and teaching each other speech and language. Lots and lots of talk, but not reading and writing, because until you can sound process, it's way too much for the human brain. The other thing to be aware of is that the ear tunes to the mother tongue within 6 weeks of birth, and you focus in on the sound range for your language. English is a very high-pitched language. Other languages tend to be deeper. You can retune a person so that it's easier for them to learn languages. You widen their sound range and so on, so that children who are coming in learning a foreign language, some of them will block. They'll really struggle to pick up the sounds of English. We could use sound therapy to make it much easier for them. Or people who've got a very strong dialect. Or if you've got a teacher who speaks with a foreign accent, etc., etc. Lots of things we could be doing, we're not doing. But they're quite important to be aware of. Our inner ear contains what's called our vestibular system, and our vestibular system is like the junction box between motor skills, acceleration, deceleration, the optic nerve, facial muscles, as well as the whole sound range. It's a really important. You can feel it at the back of your ear. It's the lump. It's buried in your skull. And because it's buried in your skull, it's picking up sound through bone and it's picking up sound through air. And the two systems need to work together, and you need to see how they're working together. If there is a problem with sound processing, the eyes will dysregulate. So if a child has not yet got to the stage they can pronounce all the sounds of the English language, their eyes will dysregulate when they are reading or writing. That makes it really difficult to read or write. So why are we rushing to reading and writing at 4? Many of European countries don't start school until 7. It's important. Also, what happens in sound processing is generally humans flip from left ear dominant to right ear dominant at about 6 years old. You want to be right ear dominant because the right ear more quickly send messages to the left brain. It is the left brain that decodes language in most humans. So apart from 30% of left-handers, for most people, they need to be right ear dominant going to left hemisphere. They will more quickly process the language. They'll more quickly make sense of a teacher's speech. They'll be more able to separate out relevant speech from irrelevant. They won't get so confused by background noises in the classroom and so on. Sound processing works more efficiently post 6 years old. Sound processing impacts on our writing and our reading. So why are we rushing to reading at 4 and writing? Another modern problem is that people are de-evolving, and we're seeing this with the flattening of the faces, shortening of the jaw. The face isn't developing anything like as well as it should do, and that's causing a tsunami of inner ear infection, and the inner ear infection magnifies the number of children who have problems processing sound, which then gives you problems with everything else. We need to address that issue. The causes of the de-evolution are ultra-processed foods. Britain eats more ultra-processed foods than most countries. Many children are surviving premature or difficult births than ever did in the past, and we haven't got a strategy to support their development holistically. Lack of breastfeeding, poor quality housing, because there's such a shortage of housing and it really affects the people at the bottom of the housing ladder, and modern environments. Everybody's cramped. The child is not being encouraged to crawl. Too many screens, too many other electronic distractions. We've got to go back to basics. So our ears, left and right, have to work like red arrows. The bone conduction has to come in first, 10 times faster than air. It's got to work with the bone and air, and the brain's got to make sense of it. And right comes in first, then left, on the bone, then air. And everything needs to work. All the pathways need to be open. It all needs to be working. We do very few checks on sound processing in Britain. I went to France, trained up in sound therapy, And I can screen people and see what's happening to their air conduction of sound on the blue curve, left and right, what's happening to their bone conduction of sound, left and right. And this is what I want to see. This child will be able to sing anything. They'll be able to pick up rhymes and things and quote them back to me. We'll be having a great time. What we're going to see are some other curves. So blue curve is our air, red is our bone. If we've got a cross on air, that's telling you there's a lot of confusion. And that is a big problem. I don't want to see any crosses when I'm looking at people's sound processing. Equally on bone conduction, if I've got a question mark or a dash, that's telling me there's confusion about direction of sound on bone. I also look at other things about whether people can pitch differentiate, whether they can follow sound when it moves. And what I'm often seeing is things like this. This child is sitting in a classroom, their air conduction of sound is suppressed by up to 30, 40 decibels at points, but it's not perfectly even. We've got a lot of points where there's confusion about direction of sound on both air and bone. So the child's sitting in the class trying to learn, and what they're hearing is blah, 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 Bill, and whatever the child's name is. They're maybe picking up their name, but that's probably it. They're working really hard to try and please the teacher. They know the teacher's speaking, but the message going from ear to brain is not good enough. And they're just hearing it as a grey background noise. It's really hard for them to learn in a classroom. We're not screening or checking any children's sound processing, but we're rushing them to reading and writing at 4. It's mad. Sound is our first sense. So if I can see I've got a problem with sound processing, I am highly likely to also have problems with motor skills, that we'll have retained primitive reflexes. Because we've got retained primitive reflexes, we've got problems with all the higher level motor skills. We have problems with the bilateral integration of motor skills. And because we've got problems with motor skills and sound, we have inevitably got problems with the eyes working together. In order to read and write, you need to have sound, vision, and motor skills all working together. That is basic understanding that our academics and education simply do not seem to possess. And we are not checking, and we as a country are forcing children to do academic work far too young. So for sound therapy, we need regular screening, and you can't really screen pre-6, 7. We could, you'll know from the speech and language there's a problem, to be honest. We can do whole class interventions where everyone does a few rounds of sound therapy, which will naturally improve their speech. We could have a curriculum that really emphasizes rhythm and speech and language and music and movement. It's called music and drama, and we could do that daily along with the PE, and we could really build the foundation skills in our children. Those are the priorities, particularly from 4 to 7. But we rush children to sit them down on chairs, dreadfully bad furniture, and we rush them to reading and writing. It's really quite frightening. Later on, we could use sound therapy to enhance their sound range so they could learn languages more easily. We could skill our children up. We don't. Let's move on to vision. We've known since the 1960s that both eyes need to work together to track text, to read for meaning. That doesn't naturally happen until about 8 years old. And of course, if we've got lots of premature children, lots of children with developmental problems, it's going to be later, if at all. So it is not unusual for me to go into a school, screen a whole year group and see that everybody has got problems with both eyes working together to track text. And we're going to look at that in a minute. If you have got problems with sound or motor skills, you will struggle to develop good tracking skills with both eyes. And both eyes need to work together. The central 5% of each eye needs to overlap at whatever you're focusing in, and the eyes need to send equal messages to the brain for the brain to do seeing. That isn't checked either by opticians or anyone else. It's not hard, but no one's checking it. So when I'm screening children, I want to see a nice step pattern of eye movements. That tells me they can track text. So we want this ideal screenshot on every time. But what I'm actually seeing is a much more disrupted pattern of eye movements that tells me the child must be working with one eye or the other. And when we come to read for meaning and we're bringing sound and vision together, the eye movements get yet more disrupted, and you can see involuntary movement. One eye just jumps, just goes off for a big jump. We're getting involuntary movements of the eyes. And no one's checking this. No one is really thinking critically, do sound, vision, and motor skills work independently? Have got them working well together and integrated? Is the child ready for reading and writing? For some reason, we are dashing to reading and writing. In schools, we could do basic eye exercises. We can teach children how to maintain their visual skills for life. We can check binocular vision when children go to optometrists and that both eyes are processing. We could also make it a requirement that every optician tells people how to exercise their eyes so that all stakeholders are talking about being able to exercise the muscles around your eyes to make sure the eyes work properly, and that is central to good visual health, to oxygenating the eyes, to making sure both eyes work together, to ensuring that the eyes are working properly with screens. When I'm working and screening children, I get them to do a thing called the Tansley test. I'm showing them shapes. I ask them after 5 seconds of showing them a shape to copy the shape and draw it for me. The results tell me how well the eyes and left and right are working together and how much the child's perception of the world is distorted. So the lad we were looking at earlier, when we asked him to draw a line across the page, what he did was draw the line down the page because he does not midline cross. And very simple test anyone can do. When we looked at the shapes, they're all on one side of the page, and that's telling you he'll have turned his head and is probably working with just one eye. But we know he's much happier with just one eye. We start seeing, particularly when we're looking at the diamonds, that the symmetry of the shapes is not good. And when we get to more complex shapes, he is struggling. He's struggling to remember all the lines on the Union Jack. That's telling you about visual memory. He is struggling to see things as they actually are. So the simplest shapes are the square, the circle, the triangle, and so on. The diamond and the Union Jack are more complex shapes. And those aren't normally possible to draw until you are 6, 7, 8. So it's really important. But we're not getting these things integrated. Then it starts affecting every aspect of maths, every aspect of being able to read for meaning. When I look at how a child makes a jigsaw puzzle, they often work with right hand on right side, left hand on left side. When they want to bring pieces across the midline, they really struggle. So they might make half the jigsaw on one side and half on the other, and match pieces by trial and error. They really cannot visually understand how left and right come together. And it's not till we bring together motor skills and vision and sound that they can see the pattern as a whole. We need to build into our curriculum all sorts of activities to integrate left and right sides of motor skills, left and right sides of vision and sound, and bring everything together. And you can do it with all sorts of exciting activities. It doesn't need to be reading and writing. It can be problem solving, puzzles, camping, sailing, cycling, juggling, robot building, you name it. I can find ways that people can integrate left and right. And we need to monitor that process to make sure they're not doing strange things where they drop off to one side. It's not difficult, but we've become obsessed that reading, writing, and arithmetic have to be taught at birth, sort of 4 years old, and we are blocking good child development. We're not supporting it. Our politicians themselves have got problems. Michael Gove is, I would say, one of the key architects of modern British education, And if we look at his physiology, we can see already we've got issues. When he's running, instead of his arms going backwards and forwards, they go across his body, and he clamps his jaw. And that's telling you he has difficulty with left and right. When he tries to mimic the Morecambe and Wise pose, standing on one leg and lifting opposite arm and leg, he can't do it. He lifts the same side arm and leg and keeps toppling over because his motor skills haven't developed beyond 3.5. He has got retained primitive reflexes, which will impact on his vision, which will impact on his sound processing. So he is projecting his coping strategies on the nation, which is very controlling, and we just don't need them. We need to all have good posture, good bilateral integration, motor skills, good sound, good vision. And our politicians are not serving as well. Recent prime ministers have also displayed issues, and it ought to be in your mind, how on earth do these people see things as a whole? How are they creating policy? You need to understand how it works as a whole. And Rishi Sunak, whose parents spent a fortune on his education, yet what he's doing is turning his head, he's working with just his left eye, and he works off to the right of his midline. Boris Johnson, when he wants to work across his midline, gets overflow around his jaw and has an involuntary point where he sticks his tongue out. He cannot cross his midline without overflow around his jaw. And it's telling you about how left and right, body and brain, are working together. And Donald Trump struggled to do Auld Lang Syne. And even then, we get overflow around the jaw because of the strain. Go back, think about the writing frame. We're asking 4-year-olds, before they've got sound, vision, and motor skills established, to be doing a complex task like writing. We are not supporting the basics of sound, vision, and motor skills and making sure that they come at an appropriate age where they're able to access writing easily. And the vast majority of them don't experience any problems for life. We have really got to move on. Reception is vital. It's vital for developing sound, vision, motor skills. Real basics. We've got to get the arches to rise between 4 and 7 years old. We need to make sure they do, because feet developing properly affects the hips, it affects the spine, it affects posture. That affects vision. Absolute basics. We need to work together to get understanding of child development vastly improved in the UK and to maximise human development. Artificial intelligence is here. You need to be able to understand it in context to work out whether it's producing sensible information or not. And if you haven't got development at the highest level, you will struggle. So we need to prepare our population at a very high level. And at the moment, we're obsessing about rushing to higher level skills at 4 and missing out all the foundation skills. It is restricting child development. It is creating mental health problems. It is creating low productivity. Let's be more ambitious for our nation. So first thing to do is let's share our PowerPoint presentation and go through it. So